The G5 Hive. All G5 all the time.
Welcome to episode 3 of the G5 Hive, where we will bring you all that G5 college football honey. I am one of your hosts, Justice. I'm joined by my man, Luke. What's going on, Luke? How you doing tonight?
Doing great. My 5-year-old had some football, so we were doing football all the time, all the day. Did that for about an hour, learning how to run with the ball. He wasn't too thrilled about going to it, but afterwards he was like, "Dad, I think I really like football." It's like, all right.
I guess at that age, it's flag, right?
How about this one was just kind of learning a little bit of just like how to carry a football and punt it and kick it off a tee. So real simple stuff. But yeah, I think next year will be flag. So he's pretty excited about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, how about you?
All right, man. Just watching this Buffalo Bills Green Bay New York Jets game. It had Aaron Rodgers on the mind. Yeah, sucks he got injured, but happens.
Yeah, I'm just so excited that football's back. The NFL was a little sloppy week 1, but you kind of expect that with the guys sitting out.
Yeah.
But college, we're in full swing of things.
So. Yeah, I mean, the game last night was bad. The Cowboys-Giants game, that was definitely, I mean, the weather was sloppy. The play was sloppy. It was, yeah. Yep. All right. Let's talk about the good stuff here. Some G5 college football. Yeah. We'll kind of start off with what the Swarm needs to know, our news and notes section for this week. So DJ Irons was out this past week with an injury. I haven't seen too much on what the injury was. I don't know if you've seen anything, Luke.
I have not. So that's just something that the Swarm, I think, needs to know, that,
pay attention, right?
This could be something that going forward. Yep.
Because he's a pretty productive quarterback, and he's probably owned, I would think, in most leagues, because he's one of the higher end G5 quarterbacks. Next, Dalvin Smith, wide receiver, Western Kentucky. Looks like he has an ankle injury. He was in a boot in the third quarter. I did see some things saying he was on the sidelines. They were encouraged by that. But Western Kentucky plays Ohio State this coming week, and so I think if he's in my lineups, I'm setting him, right. I don't know that he's going to do that great against Ohio State, even if he was healthy. So, given the injury news, I think I'd rather play it safe and put him on my bench.
Yeah, he's a sit. I think the only guy here in the Western Kentucky offense that you want to start is Austin Reed. I mean, we didn't really know what to expect last year versus, I think it was Indiana that they played, and he did pretty well. And I think you're going to get a lot of fourth quarter play here and some stats. And the other guy that I think sat out this last week in preparation for this Ohio State game is Malachi Corley. Sounds like he was okay, but had a coach's decision to hold him out. So I think those two are fine plays this week, but probably won't be a great first half.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of disappointed in myself because I started Corley in a couple leagues, and of course I was gone most of the day Saturday at the Old Dominion game, so I never saw the news that he wasn't playing. And yeah, I just disappointed myself in the fact that I should have known better, right? They were playing a very weak opponent. He's coming off an injury. There's no reason to play him. Should have known better than to start him and take those zeros, but it is what it is. The other big injury news is Michael Pratt, quarterback Tulane, who did not play, and there's been rumors going around that he tore his MCL, and that's not while that's not as bad as like an ACL, it's still not good news. So pay attention, if you Michael Pratt owner.
Yeah, not great, but Kai Horton did a pretty stand-up job there in his absence.
Yes, pay attention this week. See what they say moving forward. If they ever do allude anything to Pratt's injury, sometimes that stuff never comes out till much later. Another big quarterback injured, and that's Taylon Green. Boise State injured his ankle in the game against. They were playing Washington. Is that Washington they played this past week?
No, they played
2 weeks ago. They played Washington, right?
UCF.
UCF. They play. That's right. They're UCF. Well,
Yep.
both quarterbacks got hurt, right? JRP and Green.
And then I should find out some news here on that. I hope this week. So if I do find out something, I'll tweet something out.
All right. Moving from the injury news just to some disappointments early in the season. And the first one we have is John Lee Eldridge III, running back at Air Force. I hate to say this, but I think given people's expectations, I think you have to think he's a bust at this point. The positive news is he is leading the running backs in snaps for Air Force, but Owen Burke is getting the bulk of the work. And Burke is the one that's actually playing the position that Brad Roberts did. That they had talked in the preseason that they trained John Lee Eldridge at both spots, but Burke is kind of the one manning that spot now. He's the one getting the bulk of the work, and so certainly that's a disappointment for folks that own John Lee there, and they were hoping he would kind of. I'm assuming that most people felt like he'd probably get 80% of Roberts, but I don't even know that that's going to happen now.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add there. The other piece of disappointing news is the North Texas quarterback situation. I don't know if we still have an idea because they seem to still be going between Rogers and Stone Earl. So at some point you gotta pick a quarterback, because if you've got two quarterbacks, you've got no quarterbacks, is what they say. So
yeah, it was after week one it kind of looked like Stone Earl looked like the better play, and then this past week it kind of flip-flopped and Rogers looked like the better quarterback. So who knows what's going to happen moving forward. I think this is just a situation to avoid until it's settled. I guess if you own either quarterback, and if it's a deep league, I guess you could hold on to him, right? Just to see. But if it's a shallow league, neither one of these guys should be rostered. Not at least until one of them takes control of the job, I feel like. Now this next situation, I think, is definitely something that affects pretty much all college fantasy owners, and that's the Ohio rotation at running back with Bangura and Allison. I think it almost seems like it's 2 series for Bangura, 1 series for Allison, and kind of flip-flopping that. But then Bangura fumbled the ball early in the game this past week, and Allison got some more run. And so that's just kind of disappointing given where Bangura was drafted and what the expectations were, right?
just to action, we'll see what happens. So
it's possible
to monitor.
Both could be productive, right? But disappointing if you drafted Bangura where he was going probably first, second round, something very high.
Something that came across today for me was Wyoming's quarterback Andrew Paisley apparently hurt his shoulder in the game.
Yes.
He's supposed to come back and play this week. They play Texas at Texas. But just something to be aware of. You might take the under in that game. I'm not sure how much Texas will put up and when they'll call off the team, or hey, maybe his shoulder's not that hurt and he's going to throw the ball a whole bunch. But something to keep in mind there in Wyoming.
Yeah, and I think Evan Savoboda is the backup. So I guess, you have to be pretty desperate to pick him up and play him, though, against Texas.
Yeah. Probably something I want to avoid.
Exactly. Speaking of Texas, that Texas State wide receiver room looked slightly different this past week. Last week it was Joey Hobart, Cole Wilson, and Ashton Hawkins were kind of the top three guys. And then this week, Hobart was kind of down as far as production, and then Drew Donnelly was number one, followed by Cole Wilson and Ashton Hawkins. So I don't know. Cole Wilson, Ashton Hawkins, I guess if you want to piece the offense, look like the two more consistent guys right now. I know a lot of people picked up Hobart last week. I don't know if he got hurt or what the story was, but he was not the main guy there in terms of production this week. It was Drew Donnelly. So maybe it's just going to be a rotation, right? And they're not going to be like a true number one. I don't know, but I mean, I guess if I'm looking to add somebody, it's probably Wilson or Hawkins. Hawkins is probably owned, so I'd rather have Wilson.
Yep.
Wilson's also a sophomore too.
And then Sherrod for Fresno State is supposed to be back this week, running back. He got hurt in the opener against Purdue. Sat last week at a precaution, but Elijah Gilliam has looked pretty good the last couple weeks. This last week, he had 20 attempts for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns and 1 reception. So I am kind of curious to see how that rotation goes. They've got Arizona State this week, and I believe they are favored by 3 points. Arizona State's lost 3 offensive linemen this last week. So I can see Fresno State pulling the quote-unquote upset this week. But I will be paying attention to how that rotation works, and then maybe they're just going to ease Sherrod back into it. So that's something we'll see. Hoping to get some reports this week on what things look like at practice. If I am able to get that information, I will post that on our Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it'll be interesting. I mean, I know people, if Gilliam was still out there, people went and grabbed him again. And I think most people are just assuming like he's the man. And I don't know that I'm ready to say that or admit that at this point. I mean, is it possible? Sure. But, all off season, the talk was about Sherrod. Like you said, he got injured. And so that's at least part of the reason, right? And so.
And Sherrod's a smaller back, but the people that I talked to around the program still aren't ready to say Gilliam's the guy. So take that for what it's worth.
Yep. I mean, at this point, most people are pot committed, right? They've either spent waiver wires and they got Gilliam, but if you're considering Gilliam, if he still happens to be available, just a word of caution there.
Mm-hmm.
Next on to Hawaii. So Jonah Pinoque is back at wide receiver. And that really kind of affected the other outside receiver position, which was mainly, I think, Alex Perry in the previous games. And this past week, it was basically Pinoque, Jalen Walthall, and Perry kind of rotating that second outside receiver position with McBride manning the other outside, and Ashlock and Nishigaya manning kind of the slots positions.
So Ashlock, we mentioned it I think it was week 0. We mentioned it that, hey, we don't need to worry too much about when Pinoque comes back, worrying about taking over there in the slot. So
yeah, that's good news. Now Ashlock didn't necessarily have an outstanding game, but I think it was 4 catches for 78 yards. Still a fine game, and it wasn't what we're used to with the 8-9 receptions, 100+ yards, and a touchdown or 2. So
I'm kind of excited to see this game against Oregon, to see if it is fast paced, and maybe that over is looking good. I think it's at like 63.5 or something. So
I'm a little concerned. I think I might be sitting most of my Hawaii guys this week. Just so I watched the first half of that game against Albany, and
Great Danes really
they got
recovered.
They got a lot of pressure on Shager, and so I'm a little concerned given the Oregon defense. Now, they've played Stanford and they've played Vanderbilt, right? So they've played G5 schools already. and Shager was able to produce, I just feel like Oregon's definitely another level up, right? I mean, compared to Stanford
Yeah.
and Vanderbilt. And so if I have what I would consider other decent options, um, I'm probably going to sit my Hawaii shares. And really the only guys I own are Shager. Well, I still own some Hines, but I haven't been starting him at all. So,
Yep.
but Shager and Ashlock, I'm probably definitely setting Shager, I feel like, and Ashlock is just going to kind of depend on what else I have to start at receiver. But yeah.
And then the Tulsa used Roman Fuller and Cardell Williams at quarterback versus Washington.
I didn't
Kind of a
did you watch any of that game or
I did not get a chance to watch that.
I was wondering, and I didn't get to watch either. I was wondering if it's just more a case of where it was kind of already out of hand, and so they didn't want to keep running Williams out there, risk him getting injured, with Braxton already injured. I'm not sure, so I don't really have any input on there. But
We saw the three running backs again: Ford, Jackson, and Watkins. At some point, I'm really wanting, and maybe I'm wanting it too much, to have Watkins take over the backfield. Again, he was academically eligible last year, and I think he has what it takes to be that guy. But so far, he has not been able to take over that backfield.
no, it's
But a guy to watch.
yeah. I mean, and it's a fairly even split. I feel like between the three of them, Ford's getting more than the other two, but it's not like he's getting leaps and bounds more. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I still have some Watkins shares, and so I think if a running back is to take over, I think he's the one to do it. In my personal opinion, Jackson's a little bit smaller, so I don't see him doing it, and I don't know. Ford doesn't overly impress me, so. Next up, so I spent several hours Saturday at Old Dominion. There was a rain delay or lightning delay, so I was there even longer. And much to my disappointment, I don't really, I don't. I guess if you still own Javon Harvey, you might consider dropping him at this point. So he did not play any offensive snaps. My initial assumption was, hey, he must have broke a team rule, so maybe he has to sit out the first quarter. Well, he didn't play in the first quarter. And then I said, well, maybe he has to sit out the first half. Well, he didn't play in the first half. And then, start the second half, he still wasn't playing. So I'm like, well, maybe he broke a team rule and has to sit out the whole game. Well, I want to say it was in the fourth quarter. He was out there on a punt coverage snap, and he was actually the first guy down the ball, I think like at the 3-yard line or something. And so that kind of throws out the, hey, maybe he was serving us a suspension angle. What I did hear today from some sources from Old Dominion is that the decision for him not to play was strictly performance related, and so
That's not great.
That is not great, and so that makes me wonder. Maybe he just wasn't giving full effort in practice, and this was kind of their way of saying, "Hey, buddy, if you're not going to give us effort in practice, you ain't going to play." So yeah, stay tuned. Without Hart, they had a heavy rotation this week. There isn't there, in my opinion, there isn't like a guy that they rely on. They rotated the receivers pretty heavily in the game against Louisiana. I mean, if you want a piece of the offense, it's Grant Wilson, right? Or maybe Keyshawn Wicks, the running back. But there isn't a receiver that I could tell anybody right now that, hey, to look at. It's just so much of rotation without Harvey.
Wilson's the closest guy I want to own in that offense, and
yeah. Wilson's the number one choice. Wicks would be number two, the running back. After that, and this week, I don't know that we're going to get any more answers either this week because they play Wake Forest at home, and so I'm not. I wouldn't start Wilson or Wicks or any Old Dominion players against Wake Forest. I would start all you Wake Forest players though. The Old Dominion defense is pretty bad, and
It's
so
got some holes in it.
Yeah, Jamal Banks, Mitch Griffiths, Damon Claiborne, fire them up, buddy. I mean, yeah.
We got some G5 over P5 games to talk about. We've got JMU with the win over Virginia, 36-35. Tried to give it away, but they were able to pull it out.
I watched the first half of that game. JMU looked pretty good, and then UVA kind of came back, towards the end of the half. JMU was up at halftime. I missed the entire second half, though.
And then you've got probably one of the bigger games or the upsets of the week here with Rice over Houston in a 43-41 overtime. Again, Rice trying to give it away. They were at a pretty big command. I think they were up 28-0 at one point, 21-0. Watch some of that game. And then we've got App State gave UNC a run and lost in double overtime. I'm just assuming that every App State UNC game from here on out just goes to overtime, and just bet the overs, I guess.
Well, I think unfortunately for us, that series is done, and from what I hear, UNC has no plans to play App State ever again.
Made him too nervous.
Yeah, I mean, I got into this debate with a Virginia Tech fan last night, and they were like, "Well, it's a no-win situation for us when we play ODU." And to me, I said, "Well, to me, that's just an excuse, right? Because you should beat us. If you can't beat us, that's a problem." And so, I just feel like that's an excuse that the Power 5 teams use, right? Because they can't beat some of these G5s on a consistent basis. But yeah, I mean, sadly,
you're probably going to get a lot less of those games, especially as the Power 5 conferences get bigger, and they'll probably just play each other, even if they're not supposed to play each other. For the conference games, they'll be so big that why do we need to go anywhere else?
No, you're right. Absolutely right. I mean, you see it in college basketball, right, where the power schools don't want to play the mid majors. And now we're seeing that in college football too. And again, the same excuse. They say, well, it's a no-win situation. If we win, we were supposed to win, and if we lose, we suck. Well, I don't know. I just feel like it's good for college football when those two teams can play, right? When you have some in-state rivals, play each other.
Honestly,
good for the fans too, right? Proximity.
Like I love this week. You've got Alabama going to Southern Florida to play the Bulls. Like Alabama should win that game, but use it for recruiting tools, I guess. Like Power 5 can go. I'm assuming there's going to be some kids in Florida that Alabama's going to go look at Friday night.
Absolutely.
Good. And hey, you can come check out the game. Probably also USF is going to probably have its biggest turnout probably of the year, would be my guess for that. So, I think the Power 5 team should go play G5 teams and use it for a recruiting tool is what I think they should do. But
no, you're right. They absolutely should. I mean, I think that's the reason why Tech plays ODU up until like 2030 something, right? Because the Tidewater area of Virginia is a hotbed for recruiting, and so that's the primary reason why I think Tech agrees to play ODU. Hopefully, it'll continue after the 10 years or so we have left.
And we've got players of the week this week. The G5 Hive posted Ashton Genty was my pick. He is now up to 5th in the G5 in rushing, I believe, in all of G5 rushing. He might be even up there in all of the Power 5 in rushing. He had a tremendous game, and almost, Helani was out, he almost willed that team to a victory, put the team on his back. There was a late kick by UCF to win it, but Ashton did all he could to keep that team in it. So hats off to Ashton.
Yes, he was electric as always, right? And so hopefully he continues to get those touches both in the running game and the passing game. My G5 player of the week was Gage Larvadane, wide receiver from Miami, Ohio. He is the number 1 G5 receiver in terms of yards and number 4 in terms of targets. They played UMass this past week. Miami, Ohio won 41-28. Gage caught 8 balls on 12 targets for 273 yards and 3 touchdowns. And, you know, we talked about him last week about being the number 1 receiver for Miami, Ohio. Most people thought it would be Miles Marshall. Hopefully you picked him up last week because he is going to be a hot commodity this week if he is still available on waivers. So if he is by chance, he should definitely be a top waiver priority in your leagues.
Absolutely. And that's going to do it for us in our what the swarm needs to know. Now let's move on to the nectar, also known as the good stuff. Top producers in the G5 season to date. So last week we had quarterbacks. We had 13 quarterbacks in the segment. This week we have 15. So I am looking at this on attempts per game and yards per game. So I am looking at the top 20, and whichever quarterbacks hit both of those are who I'm adding to this list because I want volume, because that's something that is sustainable, and I want the yards because the yards are going to get us points. The next thing, I order these in order of touchdowns. Touchdowns also gets us points. I will not say the touchdown numbers because those aren't as sticky, but as I go through these, that's how they are ordered. I came with those 2 buckets and then ordered them then by touchdowns. So I also will not go over these names that are from previous weeks, in this case last week, but I will touch on anybody who is new in this list. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new players that are entering this quarterback list. So Braden Shager, Austin Reed, Mikey Keene, Jacob Zeno. Those are our top 4. And those, I will say this from a attempts per game, you got Shager at 42.6, Reed at 41.5, Mikey Keene at 41.5, and Jacob Zeno at 42. So you're getting a lot of volume there. Then we've got Cole Snyder from Buffalo. Sorry, I should say Braden Shager, Hawaii, Austin Reed, Western Kentucky, Mikey Keene, Fresno State, and Jacob Zeno, UAB. Cole Snyder from Buffalo. He has 37 attempts per game, which is 8th in the G5 with 229.5 yards, which is 20th in the G5 of all of passing yardage. You've got Ben Woldridge. That's Louisiana Monroe, I believe.
Monroe. Yep.
So he's 34 passes a game, 13th in the G5 in pass attempts per game with 254 yards passing. That's good for 13th. Casey Thompson, FAU Owls. He is also at 34 attempts per game, also tied at 13th with 230 yards passing per game, which is 19th in the G5. Another familiar name here, Davis Brin out of Georgia Southern, Preston Stone out of SMU, A new name to the list is JT Daniels with his performances last week. He's got 34 pass attempts a game, which is tied for 13th, and 275 yards passing per game, which is 9th in the G5. Another name that has been here is Seth Hennigan from Memphis, E.J. Warner from Temple, Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina. Two new names to this list are Kai Horton, who may be taking over for a few weeks with the news there at Tulane. He has 37 pass attempts, 8th in the nation, or 8th in the G5, and then 230 yards per game, which is good for 18th. And then Rocky Lombardi at NIU, and he's got 33 attempts, 16th in the G5, good for 231.5 yards passing, which is good for 17th. So again, trying to give you names that if you want to go pick them up on the waiver wire, if they are available in your leagues, you want to look at Braden Shager, Austin Reed, Mike Keene, Jacob Zeno, Cole Snyder, Ben Woldridge, Casey Thompson, Davis Brin, Preston Stone, JT Daniels, Seth Hennigan, EJ Warner, Grayson McCall, Kai Horton, and Rocky Lombardi.
And Horton could be a sneaky one for Dynasty, right? Because like you said, with Pratt out, and even if when Pratt does come back, he's likely gone. I think this is his last year of eligibility, so Horton could be a play for next year as well.
Yep.
All right, now we're going to talk about the running backs. And if you weren't here last week, it's like Luke said, it's all about volume. And for running backs, we're looking at total touches and total yards per game. We're looking for guys that check both of those boxes into the top 20. And we do have 4 new names this week, so I'll kind of focus on those and then talk about the guys that are repeats. So the first is Kavorian Barnes. He's 23 total touches, good for 3rd in the G5 with 113 total yards a game, which is 8th. A little surprised that he wasn't in the top 20 in both last week, but he is now. And then
he was close last week.
And then the other one that surprises me too is your player of the week, Ashton Jeanty. He's 21 and a half touches per game, good for 4th, and 182 and a half yards per game, which is good for 2nd overall. He's a monster, right? And I mean, I think I might own like one Halani share, but man, they just need to give that guy the ball, right? I mean, he's a difference maker for them. I'm not saying Halani's bad, because he's not, but Jeanty is special, and man, you just like to see, you want to get to him as many touches as you can. The next new guy on the list this week is Blake Watson out of Memphis. 19 and a half touches per game, good for 8th in the G5, and 100 total yards game, good for 17th. And the last new guy on the list this week is from Jacksonville State, and that's Malik Jackson with 16.3 touches per week or touches per game, good for 19th, and 98 yards per game, also 19th. Going back and looking to the old guys or the repeats from last week who are still in the top 20 in both categories. The number one is Marcus Carroll. He's been outstanding for Georgia State. If he is by some miracle still available in your leagues, you got to go pick him up. I mean, he is looking like a top 10 running back in all of CFF. He leads the G5 in total touches with 26. He's 3rd in yards per game, 152. Next up, Nate Noel, running back from Appalachian State. He's tied with Carroll in total touches, number 1. He's 6th in yards with 123. Kimani Vidal, running back from Troy. He is your number 1 yards guy in the G5 with 197 yards per game. Next up is Elijah Gilliam, who we talked about earlier, with the 21 touches and 98 and a half yards per game. Who this guy was probably, somewhere around the top 3 running backs drafted in your CFF leagues, and that's Rasheen Ali, running back from Marshall. 20 and a half touches per game, good for 7th at 134.5 yards per game. And then the last guy that's in tops in volume for running backs is a guy we spent a lot of time talking about last week, and that's Mr. Jalen Buckley at Western Michigan. 19.5 touches per game with 142.5 yards per game. If any of these guys are available in your leagues, I'd go pick them up. Again, we talked a little bit about Gilliam and maybe a little bit of caution there. The only other one I might would caution is Malik Jackson, just because that's a split there, in the running back room for Jacksonville State. Plus the quarterback likes to run the ball, so you kind of got two running backs.
Yep, that system's going to like to run the quarterback because you got Rich Rod there.
Yep. So, but again, if you're in a super deep league, like Malik Jackson could be worth an ad, right? He seems to be the running back that's kind of standing out among that group. But for sure, Barnes. I can't believe that Barnes or JT are available, but Blake Watson certainly could be. And I think last week there was some concern with him and Sutton Smith, but I think this past week Watson was the man.
Yep, he was.
So Blake Watson's available. Go pick him up. And with that, turned over to Luke to talk about some wide receivers.
All right. Last week we had 8 in this segment. This week we have 12 that have entered in both buckets of targets. Again, looking at that volume, what is happening week to week? If you're getting the volumes, targets are earned. Yards will come, receptions will come, fantasy points will come, touchdowns will come. So we're putting this into targets and then yards per game, or targets per game and then yards per game. So we've got a couple new guys here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 new guys, and 2, 4, 5 that have been here last week. I then ordered my next thing out of here was to order these by receptions. So great, you're getting targets. Great, you're getting yards. Are you getting 12 targets, catching 4 of them, and they're all deep bombs? Kind of gives you an idea here. So I ordered these in reception totals. So hey, I'm going to get, if you're in a PPR league, I'm going to get production from these guys. And then they're also in the top 20 in the G5 when it comes to targets and when it comes to yards. All gets you fantasy points. New to the list. It wasn't going to be long, but Terrell Vaughn, 14 targets per game, 83 yards per game, good for 16th. Torrey Horton, I must have forgot him last week because they didn't play last week, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
That must have been a oversight on us. So I do want to put that name in there. So he has 11 targets, good for 8th in the G5, 81 yards per game, 18th. LeJohntay Wester, 12.5, which is FAU, 12.5 receptions, 12.5 targets per game, good for 2nd in the G5, and 78 yards per game, good for 19th. People who've been here before: Eric Brooks from Fresno State, Jamal Bell from Nevada. They are here again. So if those guys are there, it's 2 weeks in a row that they're in the top 20 in both of those. Go pick them up. And then Justice's guy, Gage Larvadane, 12 targets per game, which is good for 4th in the G5, 172.5 yards per game, good for 1st in the G5. Again, we mentioned this is going to be a hot name to go pick up, so go pick him up. You got Joshua Cephas there. What was that? UTSA,
yeah.
11.5 targets per game, good for 6th. 81.5, good for 17th in the G5.
While you're talking about UTSA real quick, I did read something that DeClorian Clark sneaked on the field for a play. He wasn't supposed to play, but he snuck on the field and had one play last week. So maybe he's getting close to coming back.
And RIP if you happen to play him for whatever reason and don't have auto subs because you got a snap. So that's too bad for you
Yeah,
guys.
that sucks.
Then we've got Colin Lacey, new to the list here, Southern Alabama, 9 targets per game and 100 yards per game. So that's good for 13th and 7th in the G5. Derwin Burgess Jr., the wide receiver for Georgia Southern, he has 9 targets a game, tied for 13th in the G5 with 85 yards per game, tied for 15th. Palafi Ashlock, we talked about last week, a hot name on the waiver wire. He is 9th, or he has 9 targets a game, good for 13th, and 108 yards per game, good for 4th. So while he didn't give you a huge output last week, he's still putting up 100 per game. Sam Pinckney, 12 targets per game, good for 4th, 101 yards per game, good for 6th. And then the new name here, the last name that I want to talk about. Wow, this is going to be a hard one.
Casper
Rutzkowitz, yeah. Wide receiver out of, why am I blanking?
Northern Illinois, I believe, right?
Northern Illinois. So 8.5 targets per game, good for 17th in the nation, or in the G5, and then 92.5 yards per game, good for 12th. So again, any of those guys that you want to pick up, we've got 2, or in Hawaii's case, 3 weeks of data that says these guys are in the top 20. If any of those guys are available in your waivers, feel free to pick them up, because we want to pick these guys out so that you guys can go make actionable information for you guys. So with that, I will give it to Justice here to talk about tight ends.
So one thing I wanted to talk about real quick on the wide receivers is Sam Pinckney. So, week 1 it was the Sam Pinckney show, and then week 2 it was the Jared Brown show.
I got my victory lap in. It's okay.
So just something, not a surprise, right, that they both can be productive because they're both good receivers. And that might just be how it goes from a week-to-week basis. Pinckney, if I had to bet money, I would think would be the more consistent guy. I think Brown is the higher ceiling, more electric player. And, he can take any ball to the house at any time. So yeah, but this week they kind of flipped in terms of production. Maybe I feel like they both can probably be productive moving forward in that Coastal Carolina offense, because the running game does not look very good at all, in my opinion. So they could be relying on that on Sam McCall and Jared Pinckney and Jared Brown and Sam Pinckney moving forward. But on to the tight ends. Again, volume is king. Kind of like what Luke was talking about, what we do for receivers, we do the same thing for the tight ends, and it's targets, yards per game. Now, the one thing we do look at in addition to those 2 items is also the ADOT for tight ends. That we do have three new names this week, and I'm going to do this one a little bit different, just because I feel like the old names, that there's such a gap between them and the new guys. And so I kind of want to give those guys their credit, because, these are tight ends. The old guys are tight ends that, should 100% be owned in leagues. The 3 new guys I'm going to mention are kind of like more fringe, and it'd have to be a fairly deep league for me to consider these guys. So I want to talk about these top tight ends first. And the number 1 guy is Tanner Koziol out of Ball State at 7.5 targets per game, 43 yards with an ADOT of 81. Right behind him is David Martin Robinson from Temple, 7.5 targets, 54.5 yards per game with an ADOT of 10.5. Next up, Harold Fannin Jr., who had a monster game this past week for Bowling Green, 6.5 targets per game, 69 yards, an ADOT of 5.8. Dallin Holker who did not play last week, but was a monster in week 1 for Colorado State. 6 targets, 47 yards, 11.5 targets. RJ Maryland, SMU, 5 targets per game, 58 yards, 7.8 ADOT. And then the last of kind of the old guard that we talked about last week is Neil Johnson, Louisiana Lafayette. He did get targeted quite a bit in the game against Old Dominion, but I'm pretty sure he only made 1 catch. But he's averaging 6.5 targets per game, 30 yards with an ADOT of 4.7. He did kind of, at least in the Old Dominion game, he did kind of operate like, as an outlet more or less for Ben Wooldridge. Moving on to the new guys. And so the first one I want to mention, I feel like is probably, if I'm going to add one of these guys, he's probably the first one I'm going to add. And that's Mark Redmond out at San Diego State. 5.3 targets, 35.7 yards per game with an 8 out of 86. I'm sorry, 8.6.
Oh, whoa.
8.6 is his ADOT. But, he's kind of been up and down, which is kind of normal, I think, for tight ends, right? But I feel like, of the 3 options, he's probably the more consistent of the 3. Next up is JJ McAfee at Georgia Southern. And he's probably that 4th option in that passing attack behind Burgess Hood and Quealy. But in a tight end required league, you could do worse than someone in a high passing offense like Georgia Southern. But McAfee's averaging 6.5 targets per game, 37.5 yards per game. His ADOT kind of similar to Neil Johnson's, fairly low, 3.8. He's kind of seems to be the outlet guy for Davis Brin there at Georgia Southern. And then the last guy I want to mention at tight end is Trey Watson, Fresno State. 6 targets per game, 45.5 yards per game, but he does have a decent ADOT of 10.3. And so, maybe he's someone that you're looking at after Eric Brooks there at Fresno State. So, again, the kind of the guys we've mentioned both weeks are kind of the top guys there at tight end in the G5. And then McAfee, Redmond, and Watson are kind of like, you're in probably a pretty deep league if you're rostering those guys. But, hey, they're in offenses where they are being featured. And so, you could do a lot worse at tight end, and tight ends always, I feel like tight end's kind of one of the hardest positions to kind of nail. There seems like, especially this year, there was a group, I feel like a real big group of 3. And you could make the argument that 2 of those 3 probably really aren't tight ends, but they got tight end eligibility in Fantrax and Gadsden and Smith. And then, of course, the number 1 guy, Brock Bowers. But even he had an off week this week, right? So
he only got like one
catch for like 3 yards or something.
It was, wasn't too great.
So tight ends are volatile. So you're looking for that consistency, and so you want to see that volume. So that's kind of what we're sharing with you guys. That the tight ends of the G5 level they're getting that volume that's worthy of a roster spot in your leagues. So now we'll go on to our waiver wires, and for those that weren't here last week, we're looking at guys that are 30% or less owned on Fantrax. And with that, I'll turn it over to Luke to talk about some quarterbacks.
All right. So quarterbacks, I've got 2, 4, 6, 8 here to talk about. So Ben Wooldridge, Louisiana Monroe, he is 3% owned. He is scoring 34.06 points per game in a 6-point passing touchdown league. Like I mentioned before, 34 pass attempts a game and 254 yards passing. That's good for 13th in the G5 on both of those. Jacob Zeno, UAB, 5% owned. 31.62 points per game, 42 pass attempts, good for 3rd in the G5, and 337.5 yards passing per game, good for 1st. Mikey Keene, 26% owned. I'm assuming this is going to be the last week to talk about Mikey Keene. He's at 28.38 points per game, 45.5 Attempts per game, good for 5th in the G5, and 301.5 yards per game, good for 3rd. Joey Aguilar, App State 1% owned. He came in week 1. I'm trying to remember the starter's name who got hurt, but Joey
Ryan Berger. Ryan
Berger. So Joey Aguilar has been great. He's getting 28.48 points per game, 28.5 attempts per game, and 224.5 yards per game. Caden Salter, 21% owned. I'm assuming this will also be the last week. Maybe. He should have been, I thought, more picked up this last week, but still here he is. 31.63 points per game. However, he only throws the ball 22.5 times a game and 209.5 yards passing. So not great. He's kind of more of a dual threat guy. He'll get you about 60 yards on the ground and 1 touchdown. Again, we mentioned it like last week. Their offense. Oh, watching. Okay, we got overtime in the Bills game. Their offense isn't that. We got Chadwell coming over. It's gonna be okay.
It's but high efficiency.
Yeah, high efficiency like Coastal was last year, and their schedule isn't that great. So I would feel comfortable taking
terrible.
I would feel comfortable taking Salter. We got Keon Jenkins, Florida International. He's 1% owned, 20.66 points per game, 30.5 pass attempts per game, good for 23rd in the G5, and 292 yards passing per game, good for 8th in the G5. So I kind of had my cutoff at like 20 points per game because I'm not upset if I get 20 points per game from a quarterback. Diego Pavia, 15% owned, 20.1 points per game, 22.6 pass attempts, which is good for 48th in the G5, and 235.6 yards, good for 15th per game in the G5. And then this one is the one that's still perplexing, so I got to talk about it. Bert Emanuel, Central Michigan, 20% owned, 24.7 points per game. He only has 18 attempts per game, which is 63rd in the G5, and 140 yards passing, which is 53rd. But he's going to get you about 70 yards and a touchdown each game or each week.
Well,
I feel like at least
harder competition, right? I mean,
yeah,
you saw what he did. You saw what he's going to do this week when he gets into action, right?
Yep. So
I think they have a hard game this coming week too, right? I'm not sure. I don't remember who they play off top.
Notre Dame, I believe.
So yeah, he's probably not going to produce this week, but you know, like a lot of these guys in the MAC, they have to play a very tough non-conference schedule. But when they get in that action, man, Bert Emanuel is going to light it up. Yeah, like you're not picking him up to start now. You're picking him up to start when conference play starts, and it will pay off huge dividends for you, I believe. All right, now on to the running backs. Got seven running backs here to talk about. The first one is Malik Jackson, who I talked about earlier. You know, he's only 18% owned. He's averaging 15.43 points per game. He's top 20 volume running back for Jacksonville State. So if he's available, he's probably of the guys I'm going to talk about in the waiver wires, he'd be my number one ad. Moving on, probably my number 2 guy would be Keyshawn Wicks at Old Dominion. He's only 1% owned, 14.3 points per game, 17 touches, 96.5 yards per game. This week, Old Dominion limited the carries basically to 2 backs, Wicks and Sani, whereas in week 1, I believe they played 4 running backs. Wicks is the clear leader in that running back room. There was some concern from some folks that it would be Kadarius Callaway. He didn't even see the field last week. So Wicks is very, only owned 1%. That could be an ad in your deeper leagues. Next up, Lorenzo Lingard at Akron. 17% owned, 11.8 points per game. He's only getting 8.5 touches, but he's getting 73 yards a game. I also feel like, last week with no DJ Irons, right, that's going to affect their offense. It's not going to be as productive and limit touches for everybody. Next up, Kieran Adams, UMass, 13% owned, 14.3 points per game, 16 touches for 88 yards per game. We talked about Shamari Lawrence last week. He's 19% owned, 14.33 points per game, 13 touches for 90 yards. As we talked maybe in week 0 and again last week, the issue with Lawrence, he's just inconsistent, right? He's gonna have weeks where he's gonna be worth a start, and in other weeks he isn't. But I will say it is very encouraging that the Florida International offense has kind of showed some signs of life in terms of the passing game the last 2 weeks. And so, that's only going to be positive for Lawrence moving forward. Next up, Ja'Cory Merritt for New Mexico. He's only 3% owned, 25.7 points per game. He's only averaging 11 and a half touches, but he is getting 106 yards with those 11 touches. And then the last guy I want to mention, again, he is a freshman, but the word of caution with him is, he's seeing a lot of playing time right now because of injury to their top 2 running backs, and that's Keith Willis at Louisiana Tech. He's only 2% owned. He's averaging 17.67 points per game, 10 touches for 78 yards. Of all the running backs I talked about, probably the top 2 for me would be Malik Jackson and Keyshawn Wicks. Again, Wicks is the RB1 for Old Dominion, and once they get into conference play in the Sun Belt, I think you can kind of mark him down for his 15, 16 rushes for 80 to 100 yards a game, and then a couple receptions. And then Malik Jackson, we talked about him earlier. He's looking like the lead back in a committee there with the quarterback at Jacksonville State. So next up is Luke with your wide receiver waiver ads.
All right, we talked about some of these names last week, but we're going to talk about them again. Also talked about some of these up at the beginning of our program here. But Gage Larvadine, 7% owned. I really hope to not have to talk about this name next week. We'll see how big this jump is. But he's got 34.65 points per game. And he's getting 8 receptions on 12 targets and 172.5 yards per game. That's great. He was up in the top 20s for reception per game and yards per game. Need to go get him. Jamal Bell, Nevada, 12% owned. Again, in that 2020 bucket that we talk about, he's at 20.85 points per game. He averages 8.5 receptions on 9.5 targets for 98.5 yards per game. Colin Lacey out of South Alabama, 16% owned, 20.45 points per game. He averages 7.5 receptions on 9 targets per game for 100 yards per game. He was also up in our 2020 bucket. Casper Richowitz is what I'm going to call that name. Northern Illinois, we talked about him up at the beginning. 1% owned, 18.2 points per game. He averages 5.5 receptions on 8.5 targets for 92.5 yards. And now we've got 3 names that I did not talk about. They're just outside of those 2020s buckets, but doing pretty well here. So I want to bring them up. You got Dante Wright, 9% owned at a Temple. He's averaging 15.7 points per game, 7 receptions on 11.5 targets, good for 71 yards per game. Tyrone Howell out of University Lafayette Monroe, 7% owned, 16.1 points per game, 6.5 receptions on 11 targets. Not great on that ratio, but 11 targets.
He's their passing offense, though. I mean, their catcher,
Yep.
So he is the passing guy.
And you got 66 yards per game. Then I was surprised to see this name, and a great name for Dynasty. Justice Ross Simmons, Colorado State, was off last week, but he's 11% owned, 23.3 points per game, 5 receptions on 7 targets for 123 yards per game. Justice, off to you for the tight ends.
One thing, bringing up Colorado State, one thing that we failed to mention in our news and notes, I just remembered. So Colorado State announced that quarterback Braden Fowler Nicolasi will be the starting quarterback this week when they play in-state rival Colorado. Now, I'm not sure if Clay Millen's still hurt. I know many people, I didn't see the game in which that happened, but many people felt that the offense looked better with Nicolasi than it did with Millen. So I'm not sure if this is a injury thing or just a production thing, but nonetheless, Braden Fowler Nicolasi will be leading the Rams this week against their in-state rivals in Colorado. So if he's available in your leagues, you might look to add him just simply because the Colorado State quarterback, can be a valuable asset with that Norvell offense. All right, so for the tight ends, these first 4 guys I'm going to talk about are repeats from above, so I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time. But it is, in my opinion, is criminal that all 4 of these guys are below 30%. And the number 1 G5 tight end, Tanner Koziol, he's only 27% owned. Hopefully next week he kind of gets over that 30% bump.
That's wild.
Averaging 9 points per game. The number 2 G5 tight end, David Martin Robinson out of Temple, only 18% owned, 10.45 points per game. Then we get to Harold Fannin from Bowling Green, 9% owned, 14.9 points per game. And then the last guy that we talked about previously is Dallin Holker. Once again, Colorado State. He's only 18% owned, and he's averaging 15.7 points per game. These next 2 names are new, and these guys, again, are guys to look at. And the first is Sam Olson of San Jose State, 4% owned. I believe a lot of people kind of assumed that would be Dominic Mazziotti, but it's looking like Sam Olson's probably the tight end to own there. 9.7 points per game, 4.7 targets per game, 30 yards with an ADOT of 6.8. And then the last tight end I want to mention is Ethan Connor out of Troy, who is 11% owned, 12.75 points per game, 3 targets per game, 37.5 yards, and an ADOT of 9.5. Again, Fannin, Holker, Koziol, David Martin Robinson, they all should be owned in tight end required leagues. And so, hopefully if you're in a league where you require tight end and those guys are not rostered, I would definitely be picking up one of those 4 for sure.
Like, I feel like we shouldn't talk about them next week, but also if they're under 30% owned, we got to mention them because they need to be owned.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are, top tight end options in any format. So the fact that they're still under 30%, like I said, is criminal. Kind of like Bert Emanuel, right? Like, there's no way that guy should be available on waivers, unless it's like unless it's a 1 quarterback 10-team league or something. But even then, right, what he's going to give you once action starts is going to be pretty phenomenal, I feel like.
Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. We gave you our top performers through 2 weeks. If they're out in your waivers, you can go pick them up. We give you some waiver wire pickups. I don't know how many places are going to give you 2, 4, 6 tight ends to talk about. Here we are just looking at the G5, giving you that. Big news this week, we finally got on Apple Podcasts, so that will be available here after we record. We'll get those published so that we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Google Podcasts, we're all out there. So go please rate, review, and subscribe to our YouTube, our Twitter at G5Hive, and just thank you for any support you give us. We're trying to give that G5 the time and the limelight here, and giving them the respect that they deserve.
Yeah, and if you have any feedback or comments, things you'd like to see, things you'd like to see us do differently, please reach out to us. Right, we're kind of feeling our way through this, and so we're open to anyone's ideas or suggestions as we move forward, to kind of promote the G5 and give you guys what you want. So let us know.
All right, next week we will be back with you on Monday at 9:15 Central, the best time zone out there, or 10:15 Eastern. Next week we'll be going full bore once again with that sweet nectar from the G5 week 3 games, and bring you all of the news for the Swarm that we can find concerning the G5. Thanks for your support. Like I said, please like, subscribe, retweet, leave a 5-star review, and we'll be available on our YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Buzz.
Peace out.
Oh,